The Garmin Descent Mk3i promises to be the ultimate dive computer, and its price agrees with that, being one of, if not the most expensive dive computer in the world. But is it really as good as it seems? Today, I'm pulling back the curtain, so to speak, and sharing the honest, ugly truth about the Mk3i and my personal opinions, including some dangerous flaws that I discovered while diving with it side by side with other dive computers. Now, it wasn't all bad, but needless to say, I don't ever plan to dive with this computer again as my primary dive computer, and as a backup, I'm not sure I need it when I have other dive computers that I can rely on more at this point. Now, Garmin isn't sponsoring this video, but they did send me 2 Mk3i's as well as 2 of their T2 transceivers in order to test and do videos at no cost to me, but also they didn't pay me anything. They don't have any influence on the script. They aren't seeing this video before it goes live or anything like that. I will say they also sent me a Descent X50i, which will be shown as a whole other video. I actually like that computer a bit more than this one. I'll talk about that in a separate video. That one's also not sponsored by Garmin, other than them sending the device to me for free. I get to say my full honest review, and I don't know how much they're gonna love this one. I wanna keep my partnership with Garmin going and make this a better product going forward, but there are some major issues that I found with the Mk3i. Now, if you've been thinking about picking up a Mk3i, you might wanna really listen to this whole story that I have for you and the issues that I had before you spend your money on it at this time. I do apologize if this video gets a little bit longer, but there's a lot of information to cover. There's a lot of things this computer can do, and I'm sure it does great, but I really wanna dive into these safety issues that I wanna discuss as well. With that, enough teasing, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm Thomas Hughes, a professional scuba instructor, and on this channel, you'll see videos on scuba education, equipment, experiences, and environmental awareness. So just real quick background for myself, I've never used a Garmin smartwatch before the Mk3i, so I don't have a lot of experience with their interfaces. I've never used a Forerunner or a Phoenix or anything like that. Now, I definitely know a lot of people that love Garmin computers for all their sport activity tracking. I have a lot of runners or friends that are runners, I should say, or into cycling or marathons and all this different stuff, right? But for me, I haven't used one of their smartwatches before, so this is coming from a newcomer, not just to the Mk3i specifically, but to the Garmin ecosystem of smartwatches. I've used other products of theirs, but not a smartwatch specifically. Now that said, I wear an Apple Watch Ultra 2. I wear that as my daily wearable. I have a lot of experience with Android and Apple smartwatches in general. And my day job is I'm actually a software engineer, if you didn't know that. So I find myself pretty tech savvy overall. And that said, I want to start with some things that maybe you don't see on the spec sheet when it comes to the Mk3i specifically, or maybe you just haven't heard in other videos because lots of people have good things to say. I know Dive Talk kind of tore the dive part of the computer up a bit as well, and I might have some bad things as well, but outside of that, there's some things that you maybe haven't heard in other videos I wanted to cover for you, and I thought it was important to kind of share that while I'm new to Garmin, I'm not new to smartwatches or technology or anything like that. Now, the Mk3i packs a huge list of features, including things like air integration, heart rate tracking, GPS, customizable screens, touchscreen controls, and even more. There's loads of smartwatch features. All your activity tracking can be in here as well. I won't touch on all of that stuff necessarily, but I'll kind of want to focus more on the diving portion because that's what we're here for on this channel. Now, what I will say is that with all of that tech, the reality is it can be a lot to manage, a lot. The menus can feel extremely complicated, and in my opinion, it is a horribly clunky interface and user experience in general to navigate around and get the thing set up. God, I found myself constantly diving into menu with submenus and more submenus, and sometimes even more submenus on that to finally get to the spot that I wanted to be able to set something up. From my understanding, this is actually pretty common as far as the interface for Garmin goes. So if you're a Garmin smartwatch user, this might be something you're just used to. And yeah, if I force myself to use this over time, I would get more familiar with it, of course. But having used a lot of Samsung smartwatches in the past and have multiple Apple Watches, this is just kind of crazy in depth, and it really engineered. You could tell it's very engineered without a lot of user experience in mind, in my personal opinion. There's 5 buttons around the smartwatch itself. So there's 3 on one side, one's for the light, there's an up and a down button, there's also a select button and a back button. To me, the 5 buttons are intuitive after a while, but they are overkill. They are more than you need, in my opinion. And most dive computers are able to get away with just having 2 buttons. And when you have a touchscreen interface on top of it, maybe 2 buttons would have been enough. 5 is I found myself with gloves, especially having trouble distinguishing between the buttons or hitting 2 buttons at once by accident occasionally. They feel great. They have a nice tactile feeling when you press into them, but it's just a little confusing to navigate around. Now, I mentioned the touchscreen. It's cool above the surface. surface. It gets pretty finicky if it's wet or if you're using thick gloves or your fingers are wet. So for example, when you get out of diving, you pull your gloves off and you want to try to touchscreen it, it kind of doesn't always work, or you might need to dry it off a little bit first for it to work, which is kind of normal for touchscreen things in general, but I wanted to call it out. Now, there is a built-in torch that you might have heard about on the larger size, the 51 millimeter, and you can just kind of press the power button once. Oh, well, that's the screen on and off. Double press it. There we go. Double press it. Told you the interface isn't always the easiest. And you get a nice little torch that you can adjust the brightness for using the up and down arrows when you're on the torch interface itself. Double tap it to turn it back off. So kind of cool. As an everyday watch above water, I wouldn't mind having a torch feature like that. Helps you, maybe when you're trying to find your keys and get the right key to unlock and lock your house door, for example, or something like that. Underwater, it's not really bright enough to be useful for me at all. It's not going to replace my dive torch anytime soon. I would struggle to even say that it's a good backup torch, maybe as a way to just indicate something quickly, but I wouldn't really use it personally. I like the fact that you can turn it red as well. That's great at night for keeping your night vision. Again, above land, that would be useful. Underwater, not really finding too much use for the torch, unfortunately. It becomes a little bit gimmicky, and the 51 millimeter is the only one that has it. So the smaller 43 millimeter that a lot of people prefer as an everyday wearable because it fits the wrist a little bit better. It's not so huge. That one doesn't even have the light on it. So just another call out there. Now for me, this is kind of the story throughout a lot of the things on the computer. Some of the features just kind of feel like overkill for the average diver. And with so many options, it's easy to get overwhelmed or miss something important in the settings. Again, like there's menus upon menus upon menus, which is just overwhelming for me. I also had a really bad experience with the software updates. I swear I updated the watch at least 20 times in a row, constantly doing like check for updates, have to install the firmware. Okay, wait 30 to 60 seconds depending on the size of the firmware install. And then it finishes, I hit check for updates. Oh, imagine that, there's a new firmware update again. And doing this process literally 20 times. It took me a couple hours. Granted, it wasn't like I was, as soon as it was done, instantly hitting check for updates, but I mean, about 2 hours of it. And after 20 or so installs, I said, screw it, I'm not gonna update anymore. Now, I don't know if this is just a me problem. Maybe I have an earlier watch that was sent to me that just had older firmware on it or something like that. And there's a lot of individual patches to kind of get me caught up on, everything there. But after an hour or two of trying to get to the latest version, I just gave up. Garmin needs to figure out how to allow the device to skip upgrades to get to the latest faster, because applying each individual hot patch in a row was just painstakingly terrible as an end user. And there really should be a way to jump. Maybe it's version 1.1. And then instead of getting 1.1.1, 1.1.2, it should just let me drop directly to version 2, or maybe 1.5 and then 1.7, and do some type of hopping. But having to do each individual patch was just taking forever. And again, I ended up giving up on it. Now, I've kind of hinted at this a few different times. It's a very powerful device, but with that power comes complexity as well. And not all of it is as intuitive or plug and play as you'd really like to hope for something that's so expensive. Good things. The screen is super bright. It is super easy to read, even in direct sunlight when you're underwater. Brightest screen out there for sure, no issues with that. Unfortunately, I feel like there's so much going on the screen, especially when diving, that it's kind of just confusing again. And maybe it's just me being used to shearwater products and other dive computers from Aqualung and stuff like that, but it just feels busy and it just feels overcomplicated and again, not intuitive. It was kind of like, let me cram every possible thing I could onto this dive computer and I'll do that. Honestly, completely honestly, I wanted to replace my Apple Watch. My Apple Watch Ultra has been my daily wearable for a while now, and I really wanted to have all the extra tracking features of the Garmin stuff that everyone swears by, and have all those great things from the fit profile and the extra sleep analysis that does better than Apple does and all that stuff. But I just don't see myself using this one every day, unfortunately. Again, I mostly want to stick to the diving stuff, but because it is a smartwatch, if you're used to Apple Watches where you can configure the notifications of every single app, which ones do and don't push notify your watch, so you're not constantly being bombarded with notifications, Garmin, you can't do that. You can basically say, yes, I do want calls, yes, I do want messages, or no, and then yes, I do want every other app on my phone, or no, I don't. They call them smart notifications, and it's literally a yes, no. There's no customization. So for example, my Ring security cameras, I would like to be notified on my watch. I want that notification. However, I don't need Amazon telling me about a new sale, pushing notifications to me all the time on my watch. On my iPhone, I can go to my Apple Watch settings, change the notifications for Amazon, and turn them off for the watch, for example. and I turn them off for the majority of my apps on my phone. It's been a little while since I've used a Samsung smartwatch, but I'm like 99.9% sure you've been able to do that since like the first Galaxy Gear smartwatch that came out in 2013 or something like that. So this is a huge deal breaker for me. Again, maybe I'm more of a power user or something like that, but this is just part of the whole UI and UX. It's just horribly confusing and not customizable enough for me in an easy to use way as an end user. Now, going back into diving specifics, and then I'll talk about the major problems that I had with it from a safety side in a moment. If you've ever heard of this infamous chirp sound that the Garmin transceivers make when you want to set up air integration and you have your transceiver kind of constantly going through, I can confirm that the T2 transceivers, they do that exact same chirp. It's the sonar subwave technology that they're using. It's definitely noticeable. It's definitely annoying. You can kind of tune it out and forget about it, but as soon as you hear it again, it's like you can never unhear it again for the rest of that dive. You have this constant, like I think I timed it, it was like every 3 to 5 seconds, you get this metallic chirp sound that I don't know if it got picked up on camera or not, but it honestly reminded me of if you chew aluminum foil when you have fillings in your teeth, and that like painful metallic chirp. I don't know, it was just not a great sound. It hurt my ears a little bit in the sense, like maybe not hurt, it kind of bothered my ears some. And I'd forget about it halfway through a dive. And then at some point I'd hear it again and I couldn't unhear it. So I just want to say it is very annoying. I know some people that just ignore it and they don't get bothered by it. So I don't want to say it's a huge con, but it's something that you might notice for sure. And unfortunately, I don't think Garmin is going away from this technology anytime soon to get rid of that chirp sound. It sounds like they're doubling down and investing more in it with some of their most recent releases. So we'll see. Maybe it's something they can address in the future. Okay, but everything I've talked about right now, these are complaints are pretty much just annoyances, right? Some people might be totally fine with the interface. Some people might be okay with the way the dive screen looks. And there's more customization you can do to the dive screens and stuff like that. That, to be fair, I didn't give it that much customization on my own, but also remember that you're paying lots of money for this dive computer. So you want customization, but it should be usable out of the box as like an everyday person. And to me, it's so complicated. Very, very complicated. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So again, those are mostly annoyances and stuff like that. Let's talk about something much more serious, which were 3 safety concerns, including a bug in the decompression software that on this dive computer, it could have been pretty dangerous if I was a newer diver, if I didn't have backup computers, etc. Now, we all know a dive computer isn't just a fun gadget for stats, it's a life support tool. So reliability and accuracy underwater are absolutely critical. And here's where I ran into 3 major problems. One that is pretty unforgivable in my eyes, and why I don't plan to dive with this computer as anything other than maybe just to gauge dive or just for more testing. But it's never going to be my primary computer again after this, unfortunately. So first, I did a test dive with the Garmin Mark 3i, the Garmin X50i, which again, I'm going to review in another video, and I like it a little bit more, I will say. And then I took my trusty Shearwater Product 2 that I've been diving with forever. I love my Shearwater products. I know this is a Garmin video, but hey, they're reliable. Now, here's the first issue. So I had all 3 dive computers turned off. The watch was turned off, the X50i was turned off, the Shearwater was turned off. I jumped in the water, started my dive. And this is where that first problem was. So my Shearwater does what it always does. It detected that I was a few feet underwater. It automatically turned on, and it started recording my dive from the point that I entered the water. Now, the Garmin Descent X50i did the exact same thing. It automatically detected we were underwater, it turned itself on, and it started tracking the dive. Though it seems it may have been a few seconds behind the dive time of the Product 2, but a couple seconds I'm not too worried about. It came on, automatically started tracking, no problem. Here's the issue. The Mark 3i, to my surprise, didn't turn on at all. I had to turn the watch on myself, which takes about 30 to 45 seconds or so for it to boot up fully. And then it started dive mode. It said, oh, you're underwater, let me start dive mode for you. Now, the bad thing is it missed roughly the first 45 to 60 seconds of the dive from that log entirely, right? This is a safety issue. Like, yes, I get that this is designed to be your daily wearable, so you probably wouldn't have it turned off completely, but it is extremely common for just about any dive computer I have ever seen in my life to automatically turn on when you hit just a few feet underwater and it detects that little bit of pressure on there. So, just a couple meters or maybe even a meter underwater, it'll turn on. The fact that the Mark 3i doesn't have this feature is a safety concern for me, and something that I don't think they can fix outside of hardware changes, because it's probably not a software thing. It's probably has to do with the way the depth sensor is on there. Most people aren't staring at their dive computer their whole way on their initial descent, and 10 minutes or so is probably average. You might even go longer before you take a glance at your dive computer. So in this example, that could mean 10 whole minutes of missed tracking of my dive profile. This would change my NDL. This means that like if I was doing a deeper dive, like 90 to 100 feet or something like that, on air, those 10 minutes, pretty critical. I mean, I'm taking on nitrogen like that. I could be descending pretty quickly in my first 10 minutes, and I'm not capturing any of that data at all because the computer is just completely turned off and never came on. So like I said, I feel this is a safety issue, but this one I can almost forgive because again, you're probably wearing it all day. You probably already have it turned on, but if you did buy it just for a dive computer and you don't plan to have it as like your everyday, even when you're not diving, everyday computer, you might have it turned off and this would actually be a concern. So it's a problem I can almost forgive, but this is something that really needs to be fixed going forward because it's just a safety issue. And the X50i does it, so why doesn't the Mark IIIi do it? It's kind of confusing. Now, the next major problem I have is with the T2 transceiver and the way air integration works and messaging works with the subwave technology. Now, first of all, the messaging can take up to 45 seconds or so to send and receive, which is a horribly long latency time. It makes it pretty useless in any type of like realistic scenario that I can think of. I actually didn't get a chance to test this because of the other problem that I'll mention with the way the transceiver works. But just think about this delay, like with such a long delay, up to 45 seconds, it's kind of a gimmick in my opinion, though Garmin did just release a Descent S1 buoy that I should be trying out here soon at that media event. And that will give you like surface to diver communication. And I can see real use cases there. So there is a reason to use it. But aside from the long delay, here's the other issue that I have and why I actually didn't get footage of the messaging. So the T2 transceiver doesn't function well when you connect it to two computers on your own body. So you're allowed to have your transmitter set up for yourself, and then you're able to monitor, it says up to 8 divers. So thinking about like my entire dive group, and I add the transceiver for every other diver as well, right? Well, when you do that, there's some problems that come up. So here's a scenario again. I had my T2 transceiver paired to my X50i and my Mark IIIi. The idea being that I have my primary computer, and if that fails, I have a backup computer and still get my air integration functionality and all of that stuff, right? This would let me know in the event of an emergency, like, okay, I still have my gas time remaining or GTR. I still have my SAC rate, or they call it PSAC, which from my understanding is the same thing as SAC rate. I'm not sure too much of the differences there, to be honest. Also confusing that they aren't just using a standard term that everyone's familiar with. But yeah, the idea would be I have my backup computer, the transceiver's still there, no problem, right? Well, unfortunately, as soon as you pair the T2 transceiver to a second device, it imagines that you're in that scenario of, oh, this is someone else trying to register your transceiver so they can just monitor your air pressure. And why would that person need your gas time remaining and your SAC rate? That would just be way too much extra data and confusing for them, right? So it literally will tell you on the device, this transceiver is already paired to another device. You will not get PSAC or GTR, and you will not be able to send messages. I think you also cannot receive messages actually, which in my scenario of a primary and backup computer completely defeats the purpose of being able to pair it to two different devices. So let's say my primary computer is the Mark IIIi and it fails and dies on me underwater. I switch to my X50i, or not switch, I mean my X50i is just running still. It hasn't failed on me. Wouldn't you say that that's the perfect time that I would want extra info, like what my gas time remaining is, and be able to send a message to the group or to the surface with that new buoy to say, hey, I have a problem, my computer failed, I have to end the dive early and ascend, right? What I just did, end the dive, I'm ascending, something's wrong. Those are hand signals that we've used forever that don't take 45 seconds to send. However, even if the messaging time was quick, I can't even send that message off. I can't tell the boat captain using the S1 buoy, hey, I have a problem because my computer failed. I can't tell the dive lead of my group or the rest of my dive team that I have a problem. Nope, can't do that. I'm gonna have to do what I've always done, which is use a tank banger or get their attention with some hand clapping or something like that instead, and then signal to them that like, hey, I'm going up, like I got a problem with my computer, I gotta end my dive. And I would do my safety stop and things like that. But what if this happens when I'm on like a more technical dive? And now I got one computer for the rest of my deco stop. I'm trying to figure out my gas planning and stuff. I mean, it's something that like compounding scenarios often are what kill people underwater. So like if my dive computer fails and then maybe I had an issue with my gas on the way up to end my dive, now I'm in an even more perilous situation because I can't track GTR, I can't track certain things things like sack rate and stuff. And I don't know, it really is something that I think they need to look at. And, because I'd only have one computer, I wouldn't be able to do messaging. I wouldn't be able to do any of these air integration things other than just see my pressure, which helps me with those scenarios, I guess. But it's just kind of a cool, all those great features that are supposed to help me in an emergency just go away because I have a backup computer. I don't know, something that they need to look into. Now, I don't mean to ramble too much. I have a little bit of a script and outline that I'm following, but like I said, this video is going to be longer because I just wanted to give you my full, honest, uncut truth as much as I can. There's going to be cuts, of course, but I'm just trying to give you the full truth here. So, these two scenarios that I'm talking about, these are safety issues for sure. And they're definitely bad, but they're not even the worst of the issues that I found. So let me go ahead and tell you about the legit dangerous situation that I experienced on another dive. The same week I was in Belize doing all this testing, and I was testing the Garmin computers out, and boy, this one is completely unforgivable in my opinion. So I was already mentioning I was diving with all three computers, right? So the next day after that previous dive where the computer just didn't turn on, I wore all three computers again, the Mk3i, the X50i, and the Product 2, and I went on my dive. Now, all three were set up with the exact same dive profile. They had the same gas setting, which was air. I was diving air for that. They had the exact same gradient factors, which if you're not familiar with that, that's when you set the conservatism on there. So they were all set to the exact same gradient factors, the exact same profile, the same algorithm. They all were diving together the whole week. So they had the same saturation tissue profile, all of that stuff. The important takeaway is everything matched between all three computers. So they all should have been, especially the two Garmins, but maybe the Shearwater would be slightly off if their algorithm is slightly different, but they all should have been exactly the same for more or less, right? Well, what happened is about midway through the dive, we're at 90 feet or so cruising along a reef, and the Mk3i began showing low no decompression limit, or low NDL. And very shortly after, I was suddenly in deco according to my Mk3i, even though all my other computers, the Product 2 and the X50i, said I had plenty of NDL remaining. I want to say the Shearwater Product 2 had me around 10 minutes of NDL remaining, and the X50i had 8 or 9 minutes. By the end of the dive, I actually got some footage of this. The Mk3i claimed that I had accumulated over 3 hours of decompression time. At the same time, the X50i right next to it and my Products on the opposite arm right next to that, they cleared as normal for safety stops, no deco obligation, no decompression stop needed. And that X50i, not just the Shearwater, the X50i showed I had over 99 minutes of NDL because I'm at 15 feet. So, 99 plus, right? Like we normally see when we're ending a dive. I have no idea how the Mk3i decided that I had 3 hours plus of deco obligation when the X50i sitting right next to it with the exact same profile, same gradient factors and everything said I had 99 minutes of NDL, and my Products on the other arm said the same thing. Now, think about how dangerous that could be. I'm sure there's lots of scenarios where this could screw up a less experienced diver. I'm a tech diver, I'm an instructor, I got a lot of experience underwater, so this wasn't something that was gonna cause me to have a major issue necessarily, and I luckily had my other computers to trust instead. But if I was a less experienced diver, maybe this is my third or fourth dive outside of checkout dives, and I bought this nice, fancy, super expensive Garmin Descent Mk3i, this could have caused me to panic. This could have caused me to surface sooner than I should have. I might not even know what a deco stop is in most cases. Most recreational divers have no clue what that is because that's not really in the coursework because we just tell you to stay under your NDL, right? So this could cause me to surface too soon, end my dive early, which also sucks. Maybe it's not even a safety thing. I just ended my dive way earlier than I needed to because my NDL was screwed up. This could also cause me to unnecessarily extend my dive with a long, stressful 3-hour stop, wondering how the heck am I going to have enough air for this long deco obligation. Not to mention that because I blew my deco obligation, that means I can't dive for 48 hours now. So if this was my only computer and I blew my deco obligation because I have no idea what that is, the next 2 days I can't dive because my computer locked me out. All I can do is gauge mode now. And sure, you can dive with gauge mode, but you should really have a dive computer still. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I'm following the steps right. But because I had 2 other computers and I had a whole group of people that were on the exact same profile as me, I knew I didn't go into deco, so it didn't interrupt my dive. But is your average diver buying this really going to have 2 or 3 computers on them? Probably not. A software or algorithm issue like this isn't just a simple bug that you can look the other way at. It is a huge safety risk. And this is why I don't ever plan to dive with this again as a primary computer. I don't care if they tell me what the problem was and they fix it, or they even say, that, oh, that's because the software version was bad or something like that. This is a QA nightmare in my opinion. And for me personally, I can't trust the computer now. I can't. What makes this even more concerning for me is that all those key settings were the exact same across every device. This was not user error. The Mark IIIi simply got it wrong, like severely wrong. Now, I will say I know a QA person at Garmin who's also a scuba instructor, and they asked that I send over some like debug information and the activity log and things like that. And they're absolutely going to be looking into this to see if they can figure out what went wrong with the computer that caused such an issue. And because I had the X50i with me as well, and it was reporting different information, I can send that log over as well, and they're going to compare them and try to figure it out. Now, they told me they haven't heard of any reports of something like this happening, so it might have been a fluke with my device. It might have been a hardware component that's failing or something like that. So I do want to give Garmin the benefit of the doubt in that sense. I don't mean to just rip into them on it completely, but I mean, this is a scary thing in my opinion. Like, the point still stands. When your dive computer gets arguably the most important calculation wrong, it's kind of hard to trust it with your life. If I didn't have backup computers or the group that I dove with that had the same profile to verify, I would have violated my deco obligation. I would have ruined the next 2 days of diving because I would be completely locked out. I'd have to have a 48-hour surface interval. And I mean, I would have been screwed, right? Like, I would have been panicking that I just went into deco and came up. Maybe I'm going to get DCS, or I would have ended my dive like 30 plus minutes before everyone else because suddenly I ran out of NDL. I mean, it's kind of crazy how impactful that could have been. Now, real quick, before I get on to my final, like, is it worth it point, if you're finding this video valuable, consider subscribing and sharing it with your friends. While I did get these computers for free from Garmin, I wasn't paid anything. So your support by being a YouTube member or just subscribing, commenting, sharing this content, it really, really helps me. I'd also love to hear your comments below on your experience with Garmin watches, especially if you have one that you dove with before. Like, am I crazy with these complaints and these kind of like safety issues, or do you feel similarly about it? I'll happily provide Garmin as much feedback as I can from the dive community, so share to your heart's content down in the comments below, please. I'll also make sure that I pin a comment that's going to have a couple links in it, but I'll also put information in there from Garmin's QA if I hear back about any specifics that I'm able to share on like what happened, what went wrong, that type of thing. Okay, so outside of the safety issues and stuff, like, is it worth the price or are there better options, right? So with all those cons and the minimal pros that I mentioned in this, it raises a question. Is the Garmin Descent Mk3i really worth a premium price that they charge for this? At the time of the recording, you can buy the Mk3i for about $1,400 US for the smaller version, and it's about $1,600 US for the larger version that includes the built-in LED flashlight that I mentioned. If you want to have the T2 transceiver to allow you to have air integration, send messages, see your gas time remaining, and talk to other divers and talk to the surface if they have the S1 buoy that just came out, all of that type of stuff. That transceiver is going to be another $500 US on top of that. So it brings you to a whopping total of $1,900 or $2,100, again in US, if you want to get like the full package, depending on which size model you get. Now, let me just compare this with some other computers. So a Shearwater Perdix 2 with air integration is $1,165 US right now. Their Swift transmitters are about $400 US, but if you buy them as a bundle, you can actually get a small discounted price and you get them for about $1,500 US. Apex released the DSX last year, and that one comes with a transmitter as well for about $1,575 US, so just slightly more than the Perdix 2 bundle. And Scuba Pro has the G2 computer with an air integrated transmitter as well, and that bundle is around $1,300 or less. The point is, there are loads of options that have almost all the same features, especially the ones we care about for divers, for a significantly cheaper price. Now, there's no denying that the Garmin Descent Mk3i has a ton of other cool features outside of diving that you don't find in most dive computers, such as fitness tracking, GPS, loads of activity tracking modes, even one for like video games and stuff like that. It has a really attractive design overall, but if you're looking for a dive computer that you can trust 100% of the time, I think there are better options out there right now for nearly half the price. Like, you can equip 2 divers for the price of 1 type thing. Shearwater computers, for example, might not have as many smartwatch features, but they've earned a reputation at this point for having rock solid designs with like diver focused designs and interfaces as well. They keep it simple, they keep what you need as a diver, and it is reliable and you can always count on it. Suunto and Aqualung also have options that may be less flashy, but they get the core job done and they don't have all this unnecessary complication to them. And again, they're seemingly more reliable and significantly cheaper. Now, if you're mostly interested in the Mk3i for all the above water features, or you just love tech, it might still be a good fit, assuming you don't have any major bugs or problems like I had. But if you want a device that makes safety and trust the top priority, I'd seriously consider alternatives, or at least wait for Garmin to address these issues in future firmware updates if possible. Unfortunately, as it stands, I cannot recommend the Garmin Descent Mk3i to anyone right now, and I don't plan to ever use it again personally unless I'm doing some type of test. Now, if Garmin's QA department gets back to me and lets me know like what the root cause was of the issue, I'll go ahead and update the pinned comment down below and let you all know what they said, what happened, what the fix is, and stuff like that, as long as I'm allowed to. Otherwise, if you're looking to get a dive computer, check out this video where I cover how to choose a dive computer and features I care about as an instructor, a recreational diver, and a tech diver. With that said, stay safe, have fun, and let's go diving.